1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. Book 2, Chapter 8. Tengo. Time for the cats to come. Tengo spent the next week or more in a strange silence. One night, the man named Yasuda had called to tell Tengo that his wife had been lost and would never visit Tengo again. An hour later, Ushikawa had called to tell him that Tengo and fuka-eri were functioning together as a carrier of a thought crime epidemic. Each caller had conveyed to Tengo a message containing, he could only believe that it did contain, a deep meaning. The way a toga-clad Roman would mount a platform in the middle of the forum to make a proclamation to concerned citizens. And once each man had spoken his piece, he had hung up on Tengo. Not one person had contacted Tengo since those two nighttime calls. There were no phone calls, no letters, no knocks on the door, no carrier pigeons. Neither Komatsu nor Professor Ebisuno, nor fuka-eri, nor Kyoko Yasuda had anything at all they needed to convey to Tengo. And Tengo felt as if he had lost all interest in those people. Nor was it just them. He seemed to have lost interest in anything at all. He didn't care about the sales of Air Crystallis, or what its author, fuka-eri, might be doing now, or what was happening with Komatsu's scheme, or whether Professor Ebisuno's coolly conceived plan was progressing well, or how close the media had come to sniffing out the truth, or what kind of moves Sakigake might be making. If the boat they were all riding in was plunging over the falls upside down, there was nothing to do but fall with it. Tengo could struggle all he wanted to at this point, and it would do nothing to change the flow of the river. He was, of course, worried about Kyoko Yasuda. He had no real idea what was happening to her, but he would spare no effort to help her if he could. Whatever problems she was facing at the moment, however, were out of his reach. There was nothing he could do. He stopped reading the papers. The world was moving ahead in a direction unconnected with him. Apathy enveloped him, as if it were his own personal haze. He was so sick of seeing the piles of Air Crystallis on display that he stopped going to bookstores. He would travel in a straight line from home to school and back. Most people were enjoying summer vacation, but the cram schools had summer courses, which kept him busier than ever. He welcomed the schedule. At least, while he was lecturing, he didn't have to think about anything but mathematics. He gave up on writing his novel too. He might sit at his desk, switch on the word processor, and watch the screen light up, but he couldn't find the motivation to write. Whenever he tried to think of anything, snatches of his conversations with Kyoko Yasuda's husband, or with Ushikawa, would come to mind. He couldn't concentrate on his novel. My wife is irretrievably lost. She can no longer visit your home in any form. That was what Kyoko Yasuda's husband had said. If I may use a classical analogy here, you people might have opened Pandora's box and let loose all kinds of things in the world. The two of you may have joined forces by accident, but you turned out to be a far more powerful team than you ever imagined. Each of you was able to make up for what the other lacked. So said Ushikawa. Both seemed to be trying to say the same thing. Tengo had unleashed some kind of power before fully comprehending it himself, and it was having a real impact, probably not a desirable impact, on the world around him. Tengo turned off the word processor, sat down on the floor, and stared at the telephone. He needed more hints, more pieces of the puzzle, but no one would give him those. Kindness was one of those things presently or permanently in short supply in the world. He thought about phoning someone, Komatsu, or Professor Ebisuno, or Ushikawa, but he couldn't make himself actually do it. He had had enough of their inscrutable, deliberately cryptic pronouncements. If he sought a hint concerning one riddle, all they would give him was another riddle. He couldn't keep up the game forever. Fuka-eri and Tengo were a powerful team. That's all they needed to say. Tengo and Fuka-eri. Like Sonny and Cher. The beat goes on. Day after day went by. Tengo finally grew tired of staying holed up in his apartment, waiting for something to happen. He shoved his wallet and a paper bag into his pockets, put on a baseball cap and sunglasses, and went out, walking with decisive strides as far as Koenji, the nearby station. There he showed his pass and boarded the Chuo line inbound rapid service train. The car was empty. He had nothing planned that day. Wherever he went and whatever he did or didn't do was entirely up to him. It was 10 o'clock on a windless summer morning, and the sun was beating down. Wondering if one of Ushikawa's researchers might be following him, he paid special attention on the way to the station, stopping suddenly to glance behind him, but there was no sign of anyone suspicious. At the station, he purposefully went to the wrong platform, and then, pretending to change his mind all of a sudden, he dashed down the stairs and went to the platform for trains headed in the other direction. But no one else seemed to take those same maneuvers. He must be having a typical delusion of being pursued. Of course, no one was following him. Not even Tengo knew where he was going or what he was about to do. He himself was the one who most wanted to watch his own forthcoming actions from a distance. The train he had boarded passed Shinjuku, Yotsuwa, Ochanomizu, and arrived at Tokyo Central Station, the end of the line. Everyone got off, and he followed suit. Then he sat on a bench and gave some thought to where he ought to go. I'm in downtown Tokyo now, Tengo thought. I have nothing planned all day. I can go anywhere I decide to. The day looks as if it's going to be a hot one. I could go to the seashore. He raised his head and looked at the platform guide. At that point, he suddenly realized what he had been doing all along. He tried shaking his head a few times, but the idea that had struck him would not go away. He had probably made up his mind unconsciously from the moment he boarded the inbound Chuo Line train at his station in Koenji. He heaved a sigh, stood up from the bench, went down the platform stairs, and headed for the Sobu Line platform. On the way, he asked a station employee for the fastest connection to Chikura, and the man flipped through the pages of a thick volume of train schedules. He should take the 11:30 special express train to Tateyama, transfer there to a local, and he would arrive at Chikura shortly after 2 o'clock. He bought a Tokyo-Chikura round-trip ticket and a reserved seat on the express train. Then he went to a restaurant in the station and ordered rice and curry and a salad. He killed time after the meal by drinking a cup of thin coffee. Going to see his father was a depressing prospect. He had never much liked the man, and his father probably had no special love for him either. Tengo had no idea if his father had any desire to see him. His father had retired from NHK 4 years earlier, and soon afterward entered a sanatorium in Chikura that specialized in care for patients with cognitive disorders. Tango had visited him there no more than twice before. The first time just after the father entered the facility when an administrative procedural problem had required Tango, as the only relative, to travel out there. The second time had involved a pressing administrative matter as well. 2 times. That was it. The sanatorium stood on a large plot of land across the road from the shoreline. Originally the country villa of a wealthy family connected with one of the pre-war zaibatsu, large influential family-controlled financial industrial monopolies. It had been bought as a life insurance company's welfare facility, and more recently converted into a sanatorium, primarily for the treatment of people with cognitive disorders. To an outside observer, it appeared to be an odd combination of elegant old wooden buildings and new 3-story reinforced concrete buildings. The air there was fresh, however, and aside from the roar of the surf, it was always quiet. One could walk along the shore on days when the wind was not too strong. An imposing pine grove lined the garden as a windbreaker. The medical facilities were excellent. With his health insurance, retirement bonus, savings, and pension, Tango's father could probably spend the rest of his life there quite comfortably, or because he had been lucky enough to be hired as a full-time employee of NHK. He might not be able to leave behind any sizable inheritance, but at least he could be taken care of, for which Tango was tremendously grateful. Whether or not the man was his true biological father, Tango had no intention of taking anything from him or giving him anything. They were 2 separate human beings who had come from and were heading toward entirely different places. By chance, they had spent some years of life together. That was all. It was a shame that things had come to that, Tango believed, but there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. Tango knew that the time had come for him to visit his father again. He didn't much like the idea, and he would have preferred to take a U-turn and go straight back to his apartment, but he already had his round trip and express train tickets in his pocket. He was all set to go. He left the table, paid his bill, and went to the platform to wait for the Tateyama express train to arrive. He scanned his surroundings once more, but saw no likely researchers in the area. His only fellow passengers were happy-looking families heading out for a few days at the beach. He took off his sunglasses, shoved them into a pocket, and readjusted his baseball cap. Who gives a damn, he thought. Let them spy on me all they want. I'm going to a seaside town in Chiba to see my father, who is suffering from dementia. He might remember his son, or then again he might not. His memory was already pretty shaky last time. It's probably gotten worse since then. Cognitive disorders move ahead, never back. Or so I've been told. They're like gears that can only move in one direction. When the train left Tokyo Station, Tango took out the paperback he had brought along and started reading it. It was an anthology of short stories on the theme of travel, and included one tale about a young man who journeyed to a town ruled by cats. Town of Cats was the title. It was a fantastical piece by a German writer with whom he was not familiar. According to the book's editorial note, the story had been written in the period between the 2 world wars. Carrying a single bag, the young man is traveling alone at his whim, with no particular destination in mind. He goes by train and gets off at any stop that arouses his interest. He takes a room, sees the sights, and stays as long as he likes. When he has had enough, he boards another train. He spends every vacation this way. One day he sees a lovely river from the train window. Gentle green hills line the meandering stream, and below them lies a quiet-looking, pretty little town with an old stone bridge over the river. The scene attracts him. Tasty river fish should be available in a place like this. The train stops at the station, and the young man steps down with his bag. No one else gets off there. As soon as he alights, the train departs. No workers man the station, which must see very little activity. The young man crosses the stone bridge and walks into the town. It is utterly still, with no one to be seen. All the shops are shuttered. The town hall is deserted. No one occupies the desk at the town's only hotel. He rings the bell, but no one comes out. The place seems totally uninhabited. Perhaps all the people are off napping somewhere. But it is only 10:30 in the morning, way too early for that. Perhaps something caused all the people to abandon the town. In any case, the next train will not come until the following morning, so he has no choice but to spend the night here. He wanders around town to kill time. In fact, however, this is a town of cats. When the sun starts to go down, many cats cross the bridge into town. Cats of all different kinds and colors. They are much larger than ordinary cats, but they are still cats. The young man is shocked to see this spectacle. He rushes into the bell tower in the center of town and climbs to the top to hide. The cats go about their business, raising the shop shutters or seating themselves at their town hall desks to start their day's work. Soon, still more cats come, crossing the bridge into town like the others. They enter the shops to buy things, or go to the town hall to handle administrative matters, or have a meal at the hotel restaurant, or drink beer at the tavern, and sing lively cat songs. One plays a concertina, and others dance to the music. Because cats can see in the dark, they need almost no light. But that particular night, the glow of the full moon floods the town, enabling the young man to see every detail from his perch in the bell tower. When dawn approaches, the cats close up shop, finish their work or official business, and swarm back across the bridge to where they came from. By the time the sun comes up, the cats are gone, and the town is deserted again. The young man climbs down, picks one of the hotel beds for himself, and goes to sleep. When he gets hungry, he eats the bread and cooked fish left in the hotel kitchen. When darkness approaches, he hides in the top of the bell tower again and observes the cat's activities until dawn. Trains stop at the station before noon and before evening. If he took the morning train, he could continue his journey, and if he took the afternoon train, he could go back where he came from. No passengers alight at the station, and no one boards here either. Still, the trains stop at the station for exactly 1 minute as scheduled, and pull out again. He could take one of the trains and leave the creepy cat town behind, but he doesn't. Being young, he has a lively curiosity and boundless ambition, and is ready for adventure. He wants to see more of the strange spectacle of the cat town. If possible, he wants to find out when and how it became a town of cats, how the town is organized, and what the cats are doing there. He's probably the only human being who has ever seen this strange sight. On the night of the third day, a hubbub breaks out in the square below the bell tower. "Hey, do you smell something human?" one of the cats says. "Now that you mention it, I thought there was a funny smell the past few days," another chimes in, twitching his nose. "Me too," says yet another cat. "That's weird. There shouldn't be any humans here," someone adds. "No, of course not. There's no way a human could get into this town of cats. Still, that smell of theirs is definitely here." The cats form into groups and search the town from top to bottom like vigilante bands. Cats have an excellent sense of smell when they want to use it, so it takes them very little time to discover that the bell tower is the source of the smell. The young man hears their soft paws padding their way up the stairs. That's it. They've got me, he thinks. His smell seems to have aroused the cats to anger. They have big, sharp claws and white fangs. Humans are not supposed to set foot in this town. He has no idea what terrible fate awaits him if he is discovered, but he is sure they will never let him leave the town alive now that he has learned their secret. 3 cats climb to the top of the bell tower and sniff the air. "Strange," one cat says, twitching his whiskers. "I smell a human, but there's no one here." "It is strange," says a second cat, "but there is definitely no one here. Let's look somewhere else." "I don't get it, though." The 3 cats cock their heads, puzzled, then retreat down the stairs. The young man hears their footsteps going down and fading into the dark of night. He breathes a sigh of relief, but he doesn't get it either. He was literally nose to nose with the cats in this small space. There was no way they could have missed him, but for some reason they did not see him. He brings his hand to his eyes and can see it perfectly well. He hasn't turned transparent. Strange. In any case, though, when morning comes, he knows he should go to the station and take the train away from this town. Staying here would be too dangerous. His luck can't last forever. The next day, however, the morning train does not stop at the station. He watches it pass by without slowing down. The afternoon train does the same. He can even see the engineer seated at the controls. The passengers' faces, too, are visible through the window, but the train shows no sign of stopping. It is as though people cannot see the young man waiting for a train, or even see the station itself. Once the afternoon train disappears down the track, the place grows quieter than ever. The sun begins to sink. It is time for the cats to come. He knows that he is irretrievably lost. This is no town of cats, he finally realizes. It is the place where he is meant to be lost. It is not a place of this world that has been prepared especially for him. And never again, for all eternity, will the train stop at the station to bring him back to his original world. Tango read the story twice. The phrase, "the place where he is meant to be lost," attracted his attention. He closed the book and let his eyes wander aimlessly across the drab, coastal industrial scene, passing by the train window. The flame of an oil refinery, the gigantic gas tanks, the squat but equally gigantic smokestacks, shaped like long-range cannons, the line of tractor-trailers and tank trucks moving down the road. It was a scene remote from Town of Cats, but it had its own sense of fantasy about it, as though it were the netherworld supporting urban life from below. Soon afterward, Tengo closed his eyes and imagined Kyoko Yasuda closed up in her own lost place, where there were no trains or telephones or mail. During the day, there was nothing but absolute loneliness, and with night came the cat's relentless searching, the cycle repeating itself with no apparent end. Apparently he had drifted off to sleep in his seat, not a long nap, but a deep one. He woke, covered in sweat. The train was moving along the southern coastline of the Bozo Peninsula in midsummer. He left the express train in Tateyama, transferred to a local, and went as far as Chikura. Stepping from the train, he caught a whiff of the old familiar smell of the seashore. Everyone on the street was darkly tanned. He took a cab from the station to the sanatorium. At the reception desk, he gave his name and his father's name. The middle-aged nurse at the desk asked, "Have you by any chance notified us of your intention to visit today?" There was a hard edge to her voice. A small woman, she wore metal-framed glasses, and her short hair had a touch of grey. The ring on her stubby ring finger might have been bought as part of a matching set with the glasses. Her name tag said Tamura. "No, it just occurred to me to come this morning and I hopped on a train," Tango answered honestly. The nurse gave him a look of mild disgust. Then she said, "Visitors are supposed to notify us before they arrive to see a patient. We have our schedules to keep, and the wishes of the patient must also be taken into account." "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "When was your last visit?" 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Nurse Tamura said, as she checked the list of visitors with a ballpoint pen in hand. "You mean to say that you have not made a single visit in 2 years?" "That's right," Tango said. "According to our records, you are Mr. Kawana's only relative." "That's correct." She set the list on the desk and glanced at Tango, but she said nothing. Her eyes were not blaming Tango, just checking the facts. Apparently, Tango's case was not exceptional. "At the moment, your father is in group rehabilitation. That will end in half an hour. You can see him then." "How's he doing?" "Physically, he's healthy. He has no special problems. It's the other area that he has his ups and downs," she said, touching her temple with an index finger. "I'll leave it to you to see what I mean about ups and downs." Tango thanked her and went to pass the time in the lounge by the entrance, sitting on a sofa that smelled like an earlier era, and reading more of his book. A breeze passed through now and then, carrying the scent of the sea and the cooling sound of the pine windbreak outside. Cicadas clung to the branches of the trees, screeching their hearts out. Summer was now at its height, but the cicadas seemed to know that it would not last long. Eventually, bespectacled Nurse Tamura came to tell Tango that he could see his father now that the rehabilitation session was over. "I'll show you to his room," she said. Tango got up from the sofa and, passing by a large mirror on the wall, realized for the first time what a sloppy outfit he was wearing. A Jeff Beck Japan Tour t-shirt, under a faded dungaree shirt with mismatched buttons, chinos with specks of pizza sauce near one knee, long unwashed khaki-colored sneakers, a baseball cap. No way for a 30-year-old son to dress on his first hospital visit to his father in 2 years. Nor did he have anything with him that might serve as a gift on such an occasion. He had a paperback book shoved into one pocket, nothing more. No wonder the nurse had given him that look of disgust. As they crossed the sanatorium grounds toward the wing in which his father's room was located, the nurse gave him a general description of the place. There were 3 wings divided according to the severity of the patient's illness. Tango's father was now housed in the moderate wing. People usually started in the mild ring, moved to moderate and then to severe. As with a door that opens in only one direction, backward movement was not an option. There was nowhere to go beyond the severe wing, other than the crematorium. The nurse did not add that remark, of course, but her meaning was clear. His father was in a double room, but his roommate was out attending some kind of class. The sanatorium offered several rehabilitation classes, ceramics, or gardening, or exercise. Though all were supposedly for rehabilitation, They did not aim at recovery. Their purpose rather was to slow the advance of the disease as much as possible, or just to kill time. Tango's father was seated in a chair by the open window, looking out, hands on his knees. A nearby table held a potted plant. Its flowers had several delicate yellow petals. The floor was made of some soft material to prevent injury in case of a fall. There were 2 plain wood frame beds, 2 writing desks, and 2 dressers. Next to each desk was a small bookcase, and the window curtains had yellowed from years of exposure to sunlight. Tango did not realize at first that the old man seated by the window was his own father. He had become a size smaller, though shriveled up might be more accurate. His hair was shorter, and as white as a frost-covered lawn. His cheeks were sunken, which may have been why the hollows of his eyes looked much larger than they had before. 3 deep creases marked his forehead. The shape of his head seemed more deformed than it had, probably because his shorter hair made it more obvious. His eyebrows were extremely long and thick, and white hair poked out from both ears. His large pointed ears were now larger than ever and looked like bat wings. Only the shape of the nose was the same, round and pudgy, in marked contrast to the ears, and it wore a reddish-black tinge. His lips drooped at both ends, seemingly ready to drool at any moment. His mouth was slightly open, revealing uneven teeth. Sitting so still at the window, his father reminded Tango of one of Van Gogh's last self-portraits. Although Tango entered the room, the man did nothing but glance momentarily in his direction, after which he continued to stare outside. From a distance, he looked less like a human being than some kind of creature resembling a rat or a squirrel. A creature that might not be terribly clean, but that possessed all the cunning it needed. It was, however, without a doubt, Tango's father, or rather the wreckage of Tango's father. The 2 intervening years had taken much from him physically, the way a merciless tax collector strips a poor family's house of all its possessions. The father that Tango remembered was a tough, hard-working man. Introspection and imagination may have been foreign qualities to him, but he had his own moral code and a simple but strong sense of purpose. He was a stoic individual. Tango never once heard him whine or make excuses for himself. But the man Tango saw before him now was a mere empty shell, a vacant house deprived of all warmth. "Mr. Kawana," the nurse said to Tango's father in a crisp, clear tone of voice she must have been trained to use when addressing patients. "Mr. Kawana, look who's here. It's your son." His father turned once more in Tango's direction. His expressionless eyes made Tango think of 2 empty swallows' nests hanging from the eaves. "Hello," Tango said. "Mr. Kawana, your son is here from Tokyo," the nurse said. His father said nothing. Instead, he looked straight at Tango as if he were reading a bulletin written in a foreign language. "Dinner starts at 6:30, the nurse said to Tango. "Please feel free to stay until then." Tango hesitated for a moment after the nurse had gone, and then approached his father, sitting down in the chair that faced his. A faded, cloth-covered chair, its wooden parts scarred from long use. His father's eyes followed his movements. "How are you?" Tango asked. "Fine, thank you," his father said formally. Tango did not know what to say after that. Toying with the 3rd button of his dungaree shirt, he turned his gaze toward the pine trees outside, and then back again to his father. "You have come from Tokyo, is it?" his father asked, apparently unable to remember Tengo. "Yes, from Tokyo." "You must have come by express train." "That's right," Tengo said. "As far as Tateyama. There I transferred to a local for the trip here to Chikura." "You've come to swim?" his father asked. "I'm Tengo Kawana, your son." "Where do you live in Tokyo?" his father asked. "In Koenji, Suginami Ward." The 3 wrinkles across his father's forehead deepened. "A lot of people tell lies because they don't want to pay their NHK subscription fee." "Father!" Tengo called out to him. This was the first time he had spoken the word in a very long time. "I'm Tengo, your son." "I don't have a son," his father declared. "You don't have a son," Tengo repeated, mechanically. His father nodded. "So, what am I?" Tengo asked. "You're nothing," his father said, with 2 short shakes of the head. Tengo caught his breath. He could find no words, nor did his father have any more to say. Each sat in silence, searching through his tangled thoughts. Only the cicadas sang without confusion, screeching at top volume. He may be speaking the truth, Tengo felt. His memory may have been destroyed, and his mind might be sunk in mud, but the words on his lips are probably true. Tengo understood this intuitively. "What are you talking about?" Tengo asked. "You are nothing," his father repeated the words, his voice devoid of emotion. "You were nothing, you are nothing, you will be nothing." That's enough, Tengo thought. He wanted to get up out of his chair, walk to the station, and go back to Tokyo. He had heard what he needed to hear, but he could not stand up. He was like the young man who traveled to the town of cats. He had curiosity. He wanted to know what lay behind those words. He wanted a clearer answer. There was danger lurking there, of course, but if he let this opportunity escape, he would lose any chance to learn the secret about himself forever. It would sink into total chaos. Tengo arranged and rearranged words in his head until at last he was ready to speak. This was the question he had come close to asking since childhood, but never quite managed to utter. "What you are saying, then, is that you are not my biological father, correct? You're telling me that there is no blood connection between us, is that it?" His father looked at him without speaking. It was impossible to tell from his expression whether he had understood the meaning of Tengo's question. "Stealing radio waves is an unlawful act," his father said, looking into Tengo's eyes. "It is no different from stealing money or valuables, don't you think?" "You're probably right," Tengo decided to agree, for now. His father nodded several times with apparent satisfaction. "Radio waves don't come falling out of the sky for free, like rain or snow," his father said. With his lips closed, Tengo stared at his father's hands. They were lined up neatly on his knees, right hand on right knee, left hand on left knee, stock still. Small dark hands, they looked tanned to the core by long years of outdoor work. "My mother didn't really die of an illness when I was little, did she?" Tengo asked slowly, speaking phrase by phrase. His father did not answer. His expression did not change, and his hands did not move. His eyes focused on Tango as if they were observing something unfamiliar. My mother left you. She got rid of you and left me behind. She probably went off with another man. Am I wrong? His father nodded. It is not good to steal radio waves. You can't get away with it, doing anything you like. This man understands my questions perfectly well. He just doesn't want to answer them directly, Tango felt. Father, Tango addressed him. You may not actually be my father, but I'll call you that for now because I don't know what else to call you. To tell you the truth, I've never liked you. Maybe I've even hated you most of the time. You know that, don't you? But even supposing you are not my real father, and there is no blood connection between us, I no longer have any reason to hate you. I don't know if I can go so far as to be fond of you, but I think that at least I should be able to understand you better than I do now. I have always wanted to know the truth about who I am and where I came from. That's all. But no one ever told me. If you will tell me the truth right now, I won't hate you or dislike you anymore. In fact, I would welcome the opportunity not to have to hate you or dislike you any longer. His father went on staring at Tango with expressionless eyes, saying nothing. But Tango felt he might be seeing the tiniest gleam of light flashing somewhere deep within those empty swallows' nests. I'm nothing, Tango said. You are right. I'm like someone who's been thrown into the ocean at night, floating all alone. I reach out, but no one is there. I call out, but no one answers. I have no connection to anything. The closest thing I have to family is you. But you hold on to the secret and won't even try to tell me anything. Meanwhile, in this seaside town, your memory goes through repeated ups and downs as it steadily deteriorates day by day. Like your memory, the truth about me is being lost. Without the aid of truth, I am nothing, and I can never be anything. You're right about that too. Knowledge is a precious social asset, his father said in a monotone, though his voice was somewhat quieter than before, as if someone behind him had reached over and turned down the volume. It is an asset that must be amassed in abundant stockpiles and utilized with the utmost care. It must be handed down to the next generation in fruitful forms. For that reason, too, NHK needs to have all of your subscription fees and... This is a kind of mantra for him, thought Tango. He has protected himself all these years by reciting such phrases. Tango felt he had to smash this obstinate amulet of his, to pull the living human being out from behind the surrounding barrier. He cut his father short. What kind of person was my mother? Where did she go? What happened to her? His father brought his incantation to a sudden halt. Tango went on. I'm tired of living in hatred and resentment. I'm tired of living unable to love anyone. I don't have a single friend, not one. And worst of all, I can't even love myself. Why is that? Why can't I love myself? It's because I can't love anyone else. A person learns how to love himself through the simple acts of loving and being loved by someone else. Do you understand what I'm saying? A person who is incapable of loving another cannot probably love himself. No, I'm not blaming you for this. Come to think of it, you may be such a victim. You probably don't know how to love yourself. Am I wrong about that? His father was closed off in silence, lips shut tight. It was impossible to tell from his expression whether he had understood Tango or not. Tango also fell silent and settled more deeply into his chair. A breeze blew in through the open window, stirred the sun-bleached curtains and delicate petals of the potted plant, and slipped through the open door into the corridor. The smell of the sea was stronger than before. The soft sound of pine needles brushing against each other blended with the cries of the cicadas. His voice softer now, Tango went on. A vision often comes to me, the same one over and over, ever since I can remember. I suspect it's probably not so much a vision as a memory of something that actually happened. I'm 1.5 years old, and my mother is next to me. She and a young man are holding each other. The man is not you. Who he is, I have no idea, but he is definitely not you. I don't know why, but the scene is permanently burned into me. His father said nothing, but his eyes were clearly seeing something else, something not there. The two maintained their silence. Tango was listening to the suddenly stronger breeze. He did not know what his father was listening to. "I wonder if I might ask you to read me something," his father said in formal tones, after a long silence. "My sight has deteriorated to the point where I can't read books anymore. I can't follow the words on the page for long. That bookcase has some books. Choose any one you like." Tango gave up and left his chair to scan the spines of the volumes in the bookcase. Most of them were historical novels set in ancient times when samurai roamed the land. All the volumes of Sword of Doom were there. Tango couldn't bring himself to read his father some musty old book full of archaic language. "If you don't mind, I'd rather read a story about a town of cats," Tango said. "I brought it to read myself." "A story about a town of cats," his father said, savoring the words. "Please read that to me, if it is not too much trouble." Tango looked at his watch. "It's no trouble at all. I have plenty of time before my train leaves. It's an odd story. I don't know if you'll like it or not." Tango pulled out his paperback and started reading Town of Cats. His father listened to him read the entire story, not changing his position in the chair by the window. Tango read slowly in a clearly audible voice, taking 2 or 3 breaks along the way to catch his breath. He glanced at his father whenever he stopped reading, but saw no discernible reaction on his face. Was he enjoying the story or not? He could not tell. When he was through reading the story, his father was sitting perfectly still with his eyes closed. He looked as if he could be sound asleep, but he was not. He was simply deep inside the story, and it took him a while to come back out. Tango waited patiently for that to happen. The afternoon light had begun to weaken and blend with touches of evening. The ocean breeze continued to shake the pines. "Does that town of cats have television?" his father asked. The story was written in Germany in the 1930s. They didn't have television yet back then. They did have radio, though. "I was in Manchuria, but I didn't even have a radio. There weren't any stations. The newspaper didn't arrive, and when it did, it was 2 weeks old. There was hardly anything to eat, and we had no women. Sometimes there were wolves roaming around. It was like the edge of the earth out there." He fell silent for a while, thinking, probably recalling the hard life he led as a young pioneer in distant Manchuria. But those memories soon clouded over, swallowed up into nothingness. Tango could read these movements of his father's mind from the changing expressions on his face. Did the cats build the town? Or did people build it a long time ago and the cats came to live there? His father asked, speaking toward the window pane as if to himself, though the question seemed to have been directed to Tango. I don't know, Tango said, but it does seem to have been built by human beings long before. Maybe the people left for some reason. Say they all died in an epidemic and the cats came to live there. His father nodded. When a vacuum forms, something has to come along to fill it. Because that's what everybody does. That's what everybody does? Exactly. What kind of vacuum are you filling? His father scowled. His long eyebrows came down to hide his eyes. Then he said with a touch of sarcasm in his voice, Don't you know? I don't know, Tango said. His father's nostrils flared. One eyebrow rose slightly. This was the expression he always used when he was dissatisfied with something. If you can't understand it without an explanation, you can't understand it with an explanation. Tango narrowed his eyes, trying to read the man's expression. Never once had his father employed such odd, suggestive language. He always spoke in concrete, practical terms. To say only what was necessary when necessary, that was his unshakable definition of a conversation. But there was no expression on his face to be read. I see. So you are filling in some kind of vacuum, Tango said. All right, then who is going to fill the vacuum that you have left behind? You, his father declared, raising an index finger and thrusting it straight at Tango. Isn't it obvious? I have been filling in the vacuum that somebody else made, so you will fill the vacuum that I have made. Like taking turns. The way the cats filled in the town, after the people were gone. Right. Lost like the town, his father said. Then he stared vacantly at his own outstretched index finger as if looking at some mysterious, misplaced object. Lost like the town, Tango repeated his father's words. The woman who gave birth to you is not anywhere anymore. Not anywhere. Lost like the town. Are you saying she's dead? His father made no reply to that. Tango sighed. So then, who is my father? Just a vacuum. Your mother joined her body with a vacuum and gave birth to you. I filled that vacuum. Having said that much, his father closed his eyes and closed his mouth. Joined her body with a vacuum. Yes. And you raised me. Is that what you're saying? After one ceremonious clearing of his throat, his father said, as if trying to explain a simple truth to a slow-witted child, That is why I said, if you can't understand it without an explanation, you cannot understand it with an explanation. So you're telling me that I came out of a vacuum? Tango asked. No answer. Tango folded his hands in his lap and looked straight into his father's face once more. This man is no empty shell, no vacant house. He is a flesh-and-blood human being with a narrow, stubborn soul and shadowed memories, surviving in fits and starts on this patch of land by the sea. He has no choice but to coexist with the vacuum that is slowly spreading inside him. The vacuum and his memories are still at odds, but eventually, regardless of his wishes, the vacuum will completely swallow up whatever memories are left. It is just a matter of time. Could the vacuum that he is confronting now be the same vacuum from which I was born? Tango thought he might be hearing the distant rumble of the sea mixed with the early evening breeze slipping through the pine branches, though it could have been an illusion. End of chapter.